2711 Nightmare Fuel. It took Sunny a moment to realize what he had heard. My shadow, what? The flesh of Connacht went on the offensive just then, surging forward in an avalanche of bleeding tendrils, gargantuan limbs, and titanic power. An obliterating explosion bloomed in its path, sending a devastating shockwave spreading outward in all directions. The waters of the lake seethed, and Sunny leaned into the forceful blow, feeling his bones rattle as he withstood it. If there were any intact buildings left in the Eternal City, they would have been toppled by the shockwave. Even the dark castle shook, a few cracks appearing on its walls. But the great titan was not even slowed. A conflagration of white flames charred its enormous body, turning a vast swath of it into a ghastly blackened mass. Entire slabs of tissue vanished, as if the fire had taken bites out of the gargantuan abomination. A few moments later, however, the flesh of Connacht mended its burned body and continued barreling toward the palace island. Sunny gritted his teeth, manifesting countless chains to hold it back. The chains snapped. Which of my shadows evolved? That was a stupid question, really. There were thousands of subdued immortals sleeping within the dark castle, trapped in the labyrinth of nightmares. Those immortals were bizarre beings. Their minds and identity were gone, but their bodies and souls were still intact, endlessly revived by the Eternal City. At the same time, there were parasitic pieces of the flesh of Connacht inside their bodies, controlling them. The flesh of Connacht was not the only thing infecting the immortals, though. They were also infected by the dream curse. Or rather, had been. The immortals had been caught in the maze of dreams by Nightmare. And every being that died within that maze made the tenebrous steed stronger, their souls serving as fuel in the furnace of his ascension. Nightmare had been fighting an uphill battle before because his victims could not die. However, once Sunny opened the gate of shadow and made them mortal again, things changed. The immortals perished, and suddenly, thousands of ancient and exceedingly powerful souls became nourishment for his loyal steed. That pushed Nightmare across the threshold of evolving to a new rank. Nightmare was a supreme terror now. Drowned by the shadow of the flesh of Connacht, Sunny smiled wickedly. Just in time, Nightmare, answering his call, a vast and dreadful presence revealed itself in the shadows. A chilling wind blew across the devastated island, and the scattered wraiths shivered, suddenly overcome by fear. Then, two terrifying crimson flames ignited in the darkness, and the shadows slowly formed into the shape of a black, monstrous steed. The radiance of the dying flames reflected from the adamantine surface of Nightmare's steel horns and fangs, his hoofs turning the stone rubble to dust. With his mane dancing in the wind, Nightmare galloped across the fractured ground, bringing terror and dread with him. Reaching Sunny, he stopped and cast a chilling gaze at him, cold fury burning in his ominous crimson eyes. Sunny could not help but smile. Good job, buddy. Then, he pointed at the gargantuan form of the flesh of Connacht. Go put that thing to sleep. Nightmare stared at him for a few moments, then turned to Lu Kappa at the great titan and neighed. The sound of the appalling stallion's voice echoed above the boiling lake like a dreadful lullaby, and he rushed forward in a torrent of harrowing darkness. Sunny looked at the colossal abomination, too. Suddenly, it did not seem so enormous anymore. Well, naturally it didn't. The notion of a great titan was daunting and calamitous. However, when two supreme titans and a supreme terror opposed it, it lost some of its dreadful implication. Let's go. Not wishing to let his steed outpace him, Sunny lunged forward. The flesh Connacht was vast. Its body, its soul, its will were like boundless oceans, seemingly endless and inexhaustible. So, even if Nightmare was supreme now, it was going to take some time to lull the titanic abomination into slumber. But not as much time as it would have taken normally. After all, the great titan was weakened by 4 fully augmented links of the curse. All its resistances were compromised by a sinister poison, and it was made vulnerable to the insidious infection of the dream curse. The titan was going to fall asleep much faster than it was supposed to. And even before that, it would slowly grow drowsy, compounding the advantage Sunny and Nephis had. Somewhere behind them, Slayer and Jet fought side by side, eradicating the frenzied wraiths. Saint and Fiend led the Shadow Legion to do the same. Knave followed the shadow of Darren, observing how the ancient sovereign fought with focused intensity. The dark castle trembled slightly. This little, it seemed that the marvelous mimic was sneakily devouring the bodies of the perished immortals while its master was looking away. Sunny was a bit concerned, but he decided to deal with the gluttonous shadow later. For now, he had a great titan to fight. Emerging from the cloud of immolating flames like a bleeding mountain, the flesh of Connacht finally stepped onto the soil of the palace island. Its red mass instantly seemed to take root in it, numerous tendrils shooting from its feet and shins into the ground. Then, the flesh began to spread, slowly devouring the island. The blessing flashed, severing one of the great titan's knees. Another explosion detonated within the cut, obliterating the entire joint. It repaired itself, of course, but not before the flesh of Konnik lost balance and fell to its knees, supporting its inconceivable weight with both forearms. Sunny was not celebrating, though, because both forearms of the great titan took Kappa root, too, accelerating the rate with which the red mass of ghastly flesh spread south from the northern shore. Damnation! Taken aback a little, he watched as the palace island was being slowly consumed by an ocean of bleeding flesh. The ghastly mass continued to grow and spread without ever slowing down or showing any sign of stopping. At the source of it, the flesh of Konnik had lost all resemblance to a human, looking more like an abominable four-legged beast. Sunny grimaced, nonplussed. Well, that's just great. 2712 Three Titans. The flesh of Konnik was like a force of nature, unstoppable and seemingly inevitable. Its ghastly body was like a mountain, a furious mountain that was full of frenzied malevolence and hunger, overcome by an insatiable greed to assimilate all living beings into its grotesque expanse. At the same time, it mended and restored itself no matter what grievous wounds were dealt to it, indifferently shrugging off attacks that would have destroyed entire cities, if not continents. The gigantic vessel of the great titan was only half a pg oblong, too. There was also the undulating, revolting mass of red flesh that expanded outward from where it stood on the fractured shore, slowly consuming the palace island as it grew. Sunny hated to admit it, but he was honestly at a loss. How were they supposed to stop that boundless horror? He sifted through his memory, trying to remember if he had ever battled a similar nightmare creature. There had been some that were immense, and there had been some that were like elemental forces. There had even been some that boasted inexhaustible vitality, but Sunny had never faced an adversary quite like this. 1. The closest match he could think of was a nightmare creature he knew of, but had not witnessed himself, Aletheia of the Nine, the First Seeker. That fiend had even corrupted everything it touched, just like the flesh of Konnik infected and assimilated everyone that touched it. Nephis, how exactly did you defeat the First Seeker? Having failed to keep the great titan away from the island, Nephis streaked across the sky and landed gracefully nearby, sliding back on wet stone before coming to a halt just a few meters away from Sunny. Her voice sounded a little concerned when she spoke. That thing, well, I blew up the city. She raised the blessing, preparing to resume her relentless assault on the distressing titan. That didn't kill her, though. So I blew up the city some more. And after that, I burned all that remained. She had already unleashed the wrath of her flames upon the flesh of Konnik, and it did not help, even though the power she wielded now was incomparably greater than it had been in the tomb of Ariel. Still, the answer was typical. No, really, how did a woman whose go-to strategy was, if you can attack something up, why bother coming up with anything else? Become the ruler of humanity. Oh right. It was because Sunny, Cassie, and Nephis had schemed and plotted for years to put her on the throne. And also because blowing things up was an effective strategy in a surprising number of situations. But, sadly, not this situation. Sunny gritted his teeth. That doesn't seem to be working, though. Nephis glanced at the towering figure of the flesh of Konnik calmly, then nodded. And that is not our only problem, either. She looked past the great titan. Out there, the eternal city was slowly coming undone. The invisible dome that had protected it for thousands of years was unraveling, and the black depths of the Stormsia were rushing into the breaches, eager to reclaim their prize. The edges of the vast ruin had already been crushed and consumed by water, which stood like a dark wall in the distance. Closer to the palace island, hexagonal pillars stood here and there, with new ones appearing every few seconds. Some of the islands were completely destroyed, some had been fractured or pierced. The wharf had been obliterated. The lighthouse still stood, somehow, even if it had been submerged in water. Just then, another pillar descended from the broken dome, devastating the clock tower, this time, forever. The final devastation was slowly converging on the heart of the Eternal City, which meant that they did not have a lot of time left, even if the flesh of Konnik did not swallow them soon. Nephis spared Sunny a brief look. How much longer do you need? Her tone was even, but he could tell that she was eager to reclaim Nightwalker for the benefit of humanity, too. After all, the fate of humanity was not only her direct, but also personal responsibility. Sunny grimaced. A bit longer. Nephis lingered for a split second, then nodded. Then we hold that thing back for as long as we must. With that, She ignited her soul, burning through it to unleash a blinding white inferno. The names escaped from her lips, shaping the world according to her will. This time, it was Sunny who manifested a pair of black wings and soared into the air. The sky was crumbling upon the ruins of the Eternal City, and in its heart, a grotesque red infection was spreading like a vast tumor. It felt like the world was coming to an end. Let's make it a happy end, then. A towering wall of white flames rose across the northern reaches of the Palace Island, cutting off the advance of the spreading mass of flesh. The avalanche of bleeding tissue fell into the fire and burned, turning to ash, then grew again and burned again, disappearing into the immolating crucible. The fractured ground turned incandescent and then melted, becoming a sea of lava. It flowed into the lake, producing billowing clouds of searing steam. High above, Sunny opened the gate of shadow once again and summoned the ancient darkness of the realm of death into his hand. He manifested it into a long javelin, making it as heavy as he could, heavy enough that even his supreme strength was barely enough to hold it. Then, he raised his hand and threw the javelin down with all his might. No tricks, no clever enchantments. Just inconceivable weight and pure kinetic force. The black javelin fell like a dark meteor and pierced the shoulder of the great titan, impacting it with so much force that the huge nightmare creature staggered and was pushed to the ground. Its shoulder joint exploded, erased from existence, and one of its limbs was separated from the great mass of slithering flesh. The entire island quaked, a vast swath of it sliding into the boiling lake. Countless tendrils of flesh shot from the torn limb, reconnecting it to the main body. But before it was fully attached, Sunny had already summoned another javelin. I just need to buy us time. The battle raged as more and more of the Eternal City disappeared under the water. 2,713 elemental forces. In the end, the flesh of Konnik never reached the Dark Castle. It grew and spread until the entire northern part of the Palace Island became consumed by the virulent mass of red flesh. Sunny could easily imagine that harrowing Red Sea expanding endlessly, swallowing entire cities, kingdoms, and realms, metastasizing until the entire world and all the living creatures inhabiting it became nothing but one endless, dreadful expanse of undulating flesh. A single, abhorrent organism. But that was not meant to be, because a towering wall of immolating white flame ignited in the great titan's path like a sacred barrier. No matter how much the harrowing mass of bleeding flesh grew, no matter how hungrily it reached forward, its tendrils were burned and incinerated, becoming nothing but ash. It was a primal, elemental conflict between two titans of an equal rank. Nefis stood motionlessly behind the wall of fire, looking forward with a dispassionate expression on her beautiful face. Her calm gray eyes were cold and firm, shining with the pure white radiance of incandescent flame, and the scathing, dreadful agony of being burned alive. Behind the emotionless mask, however, a storm of furious passions fueled her fire. The sea of red flesh could not pass the wall of white flames, but the flames could not spread and consume the Red Sea, either. The two titanic forces were at a stalemate. Meanwhile, the main vessel of the great titan, a hideous, bestial colossus of bleeding flesh, was struggling to advance deeper inland. Its attempts were thwarted by Sunny, who unleashed a hail of devastating javelins from the dark expanse of the crumbling sky, all aimed at the joints and tendons of the detestable creature. Each javelin struck like a meteor, causing the boiling waters of the vast lake to overflow its banks and making the sprawling ruins of the Eternal City quake violently. His aim was true, striking the flesh of Konnik in the precise points that, if damaged, would slow the titan down the most. In retaliation, the gargantuan nightmare creature unleashed a vile forest of towering tendrils to pursue Sunny across the sky, forcing him to play a fatal game of cat and mouse across the collapsing firmament. The battle of three titans was truly terrifying, unfolding like a world-ending calamity in the heart of the dying city. No, actually, isn't it the battle of four titans? Serpent participated, too, and naturally, there was Nightmare as well. The battle had gone badly for Sunny and Nefis at first. They had barely managed to hold ground, gritting their teeth and refusing to be pushed back. He was even forced to consider the worst-case scenario, abandoning Nightwalker and retreating to save themselves. But then, slowly, the dream curse started to take hold. It was difficult to notice at first, the effects barely noticeable. But as Sunny and Nefis stubbornly continued to resist the flesh of Konnik, they felt their enemy slowly growing unfocused. The speed with which the red flesh spread diminished a little, and the movements of the titanic abomination grew faintly sluggish. And as they stood their ground some more, the difference slowly became more pronounced, until it was easily noticeable. The flesh of Connacht was weakened by the curse, which allowed the dream curse to take root in its consciousness faster, which, in turn, made it weaker still. Contained by Neph's flame and undermined by an insidious synergy of Sunny's powers, the Great Titan fell into a vicious cycle. And once it did, there was no escape. The gargantuan nightmare creature, which had been slowly advancing south, became completely immobilized by the devastating rain of black javelins. The sea of red flesh, which had been straining to drown out the wall of white flames with its ghastly mass, started to recede. The northern part of the island had been completely destroyed by then. The ground was shattered and pulverized, then melted into lava and swallowed by the lake. Billowing clouds of boiling steam and swirling ash were washed away by the ice-cold rain, and deafening thunderclaps echoed above the ruins as enormous waterfalls crushed the eternal city into dust in the distance. The Shadow Legion had wiped out most of the remnant wraiths by then, allowing its champions to JO in the fight against the flesh of Connacht. Saint arrived first, reshaping her tenebrous blade into a great bow made of pure darkness. Fiend rose from the shadows and gleefully dove into the towering wall of white flames. His steel body turned incandescent, and he unleashed his own infernal flames upon the receding sea of undulating flesh. Slayer ignored her grievous wounds to draw the string of her bow against the faltering Great Titan. Knave used the last of his essence to pierce the limbs of the titanic fiend with towering spikes of azure ice, and lastly, Jet faced one more nightmare creature born from the scattered fragments of Connacht, shredding its flesh with a storm of enchanted shurikens. Their combined assault slowed the Great Titan down, then halted its advance completely. The red sea of flesh was pushed back and incinerated, receding until it disappeared altogether. Only the gigantic, hideous mountain of flesh that was the nightmare creature's main vessel remained. Nephis, Sunny, and their companions continued to deal it an unimaginable amount of damage. The power of sovereigns, saints, and supreme shadows descended upon it like an annihilating guillotine, tearing the gargantuan body of the flesh of Connacht apart over and over again. It was truly an assault worthy of destroying a Great Titan. Sunny even caught himself feeling quietly awed by their terrifying show of force. And yet, how is this even possible? The flesh of Connacht refused to die. It gefused to be irrevocably wounded, even. Its body and soul continued to repair themselves, enduring an unfathomable amount of punishment with no visible effect. No matter how terribly the Great Titan was mangled and mutilated, soon enough, it was entirely unscathed again. It stayed alive. And it was still alive by the time the dream curse pulled him into the embrace of deep, unnatural slumber. That was how the Eternal City was conquered. What was left of it, at least. 2714 Fury of the Sea. This is a first. Standing on the ruins of the Palace Island, Nephis gazed at the huge, motionless figure of the flesh of Connacht. She had released her transcended form, becoming human again. Her eyes were dim and tired, the white flames that had burned in them long extinguished. However, the fire dancing on the rubble still reflected in their beautiful gray depths, so there was little difference from how they had shone before. The Great Titan was asleep. It lay on the bed of ash and molten lava, lulled into deep slumber. Sunny and Nephis stood some distance away, surrounded by their companions. They had poured everything they had into destroying the titanic nightmare creature, but it was all for naught. Finally, after utterly exhausting themselves, they stopped. Nephis turned and glanced at Sunny. I have never met a nightmare creature whom I could defeat, but not kill. Sunny stared at the slumbering titan with a peculiar expression. Yeah, indeed. His mind was still reeling in the aftermath of the calamitous confrontation. The siege of the Eternal City, the mad rush to the Palace Island, the stand against the Dutchman and its Wraith Armada, and finally the battle against the flesh of Connacht, all of it had happened so recently and so rapidly, in quick succession. So, he was failing to fully acknowledge both what had happened and that it was all but over. I don't think I've ever been in this situation, either. It was preposterous, really. Usually, a battle ended when the enemy was dead. Killing the enemy was synonymous with achieving victory. One could win a bloodless victory, of course, but defeating an abomination and still failing to kill it was a bizarre novelty. Sunny regarded the flesh of Connacht silently. The thing was still alive. It had been captured by the dream curse, but even now that nightmare was a supreme terror, the maze of harrowing dreams was not going to hold a Great Titan indefinitely, or even for long. The ghastly nightmare creature was going to shake off its slumber eventually. So what do we do with it now? Nephis hesitated for a few seconds, then glanced into the distance. The distance was not that far anymore. The barrier surrounding the Eternal City was failing. In fact, the rate of its destruction had been increasing exponentially. By now, a dozen hexagons composing the invisible dome blinked out of existence every moment, unleashing roaring waterfalls of dark water. The outer ring of the ruin had already been swallowed by water, so now, it seemed as if a black wall was closing in on the palace island from all sides, erasing the world as it drew closer and closer. The inner ring was half gone, too, and there were even several hexagonal pillars falling into the turbulent lake. Neffys let out a quiet sigh. Do we need to do anything? She remained silent for a moment. The terrible weight of the Stormsia will soon descend upon the sleeping titan. Even if the abomination survives the pressure, it will most likely be immobilized. And even if it retains the ability to move despite carrying the entire Stormsia on its shoulders, it might not ever find human citadels scattered in the waters far east of here. If it does, decades would have passed. The sea is vast, after all. Decades later, we will either be strong enough to vanquish it once and for all, or dead. Sunny glanced at her incredulously. So are you suggesting we just leave it? He glanced at the monstrous, towering mass of the flesh of Connacht. Neffys, Jet, and Knave glanced at it too, which meant that Cassie was watching, as well. Nobody said anything for a while. Eventually, it was Nightmare who broke the silence, letting out a quiet snort and glaring at the mountain of bleeding flesh with smoldering hatred. Neffys and Sunny did not react, and Jet remained her usual self, too. However, Knave and Fiend could not help but shiver at the sound of the harrowing Destroyer's voice. Considering that Fiend was dozens of meters tall, that was quite the sight. Sunny shook his head. I guess that is. His voice was drowned out by the ferocious roar of rushing water. High above them, several vast swaths of the dome vanished at the same time, and innumerable tons of foaming water plummeted down from great height. The world shook when the water reached the ruins, devastating the islands closest to the lake and erasing the southern end of the palace island from existence. This time, the damage was not limited to those islands alone. The very foundation of the Eternal City seemed to have reached its limit, fracturing with a deafening noise. Several of the remaining islands crumbled and collapsed into the seething canals, revealing where the enormous fractures were hidden. Those fractures spread outward from the point of failure, and most of them converged on the palace island. The palace island crumbled, as well. Crap. Suddenly, Sunny realized that the flesh of Connacht was not the real problem. The Great Titan had been defeated, so even if they failed to slay it, that was all in the past. The current peril facing them was the Eternal City itself. Having broken it, they now had to survive its destruction. The decision on how to deal with the flesh of Connacht had been made for them. It's time to escape. As the ground opened beneath their feet, Neffys summoned her wings again. Sunny grabbed Jet and Knave, pulling them through the shadows. A moment later, they appeared on the walls of the dark castle. It was leaning heavily to the side, perched precariously on the edge of a deep chasm. Far below, the dark expanse of the deep fracture was quickly filling up with foaming water. Ignoring it, Sunny pushed his companions toward the graceful silhouette of the chain breaker. He forced out a smile, then grinned earnestly. My fellow treasure hunters, I hereby announce the completion of the Eternal City expedition. It was a resounding success. Thank you for joining me on this fun and mildly amusing adventure. You both performed admirably. Now, we just need to escape this sunken hell alive. Knave gave him a startled look. Wah! Before he could finish, Sunny pointed at Cassie, who was already landing on the deck of the chain breaker. Follow her. I'll join you as soon as I can, if I can. In any case, go. Sparing one glance back and making sure that Neffys was already ascending to the Ivory Island, Sunny pushed them one more time and stepped into the shadows again. As soon as he left them, his gaze landed on his charred incarnation, which was still stitching the wayward shadow of Nightwalker back to its master amid the devastation. You fool, what's taking you so long? His figure separated into 4 identical avatars, each glaring at the 5th with the same indignation. Why are you so slow, bastard? We have defeated an entire Wraith armada and a Great Titan while you were dawdling around. What the hell? Do you see all this water? We hate water. As more of the dome collapsed, unleashing an apocalyptic deluge, Sunny gritted his teeth and glanced at his other incarnations with seething fury. Shut the hell up, wretches. He paused for a moment, and then growled. Since you're already here, pick up a needle and help out. 2,715 in stitches. Sunny had already done most of the work, but he was tired. His will was exhausted. As it turned out, undoing a severing performed by the demon of repose was far more difficult than breaking the void chamber. Maybe it was because this time, it was the ancient demon who had destroyed the bond between a living being and their shadow, while Sunny was responsible for recreating it. Breaking things was always easier than making them. Damn it. Mustering his strength, Sunny forced the world to submit, reshaping it according to his will, one stitch at a time. His other 4 incarnations joined, hastening the process. The needles they manifested from shadows were no different from supreme implements, and yet they were far inferior to the Weaver's needle, a tool that had been created by Nether and bathed in Weaver's blood, imbued with no enchantments but possessing mystical power. So, things were still going slower than Sunny would have preferred. The Eternal City was in its death throes all around them. Nightwalker studied the 5 identical avatars of Sunny for a bit, then looked around. Crazy bastard, you really did it, you destroyed the Eternal City. The wall of dark water was already encroaching upon the lake. The southern expanse of the Palace Island had been erased from existence, and more of the dome was blinking out of existence. The deafening roar of plummeting water and the thunderous impacts of descending pillars made the world quake. Sunny spared him a brief glance and smiled. Of course I did. I said I would, after all. And I am the most honest person in the world, 7 most honest people in 2 worlds, actually. Haven't I told you? Nightwalker let out a forced chuckle, grimacing from pain. Then, he looked up. That flying ship is leaving. Sunny nodded. Good. I told them to leave. There was a loud, rumbling noise behind them. The foundation of the island continued to crumble, and the impossible heavy sphere of jagged metal fell down into one of the chasms. Sunny watched it roll with regret, then cursed quietly and sent one of his incarnations after it. Soon enough, it ended up in his soul sea. Granted, transporting it there almost drained his nearly boundless reserves of essence. He could get his essence back, though, missing out on this odd trophy, meanwhile, would have gnawed at him forever. Nightwalker showed no signs of anxiety as he watched the chain breaker fly away. In fact, his youthful face returned to its usual distant expression. He even stopped pretending to be bothered by the pain. After decades spent fighting and dying in the Eternal City, there was probably no kind of pain that could impress him. The flying island is moving. Sunny threw a swift glance at the Ivory Island, then concentrated on his work again. Good. They're not wasting any time. Nightwalker remained silent for a few moments, studying him with a dark and detached kind of amusement. Eventually, he asked with a hint of curiosity in his calm voice. Why are you trying so hard? Sunny halted for a brief moment, then continued to stitch. Haven't I told you? It's because I am desperate. His voice was hoarse and somber. You might not know it because you've been stuck here for decades, but the world is coming undone. The dream realm is in the process of consuming Earth, and the fallen deities of that cursed world are stirring. Cursed nightmare creatures, unholy nightmare creatures, and countless nightmare creatures of lesser rank, as well. All of them are going to wash over the human enclaves like a tide before too long. Sunny made another stitch. So even if we manage to resettle humanity before the world ends, it will still end up being wiped out sooner rather than later, unless it gives birth to new gods. Which means that some of us will have to challenge the 5th nightmare. The 6th nightmare, as well. Which means the strongest champions of humanity will either die inside the seeds or be gone for a long time. Including me. Oh, Sunny almost froze. So what's how it is? I see. While saying those words, he suddenly realized something. It was the fact that he had not hesitated to include himself among those who would challenge the nightmares. He had been struggling with the decision to return to the cruel embrace of the nightmare spell for the longest time. But somewhere along the way, perhaps in the frigid expanse of Ariel's game, maybe on the grimy streets of Mirage City, or possibly even here, in the sunken hell of repose, he seemed to have already made that decision without even realizing it. Sunny had already decided to reclaim his fate, to be bound by fate once again. Only, this time, nobody was putting him in chains. Instead, he was making a choice to accept them, which, maybe, made all the difference. He was choosing duty over freedom, trust over independence, responsibility over self-interest. He did not want to be forgotten anymore. He did not want to be an orphan shadow anymore. It was a terrible thing, after all, for a shadow to walk around with nothing to cast it. Well, something like that. Sunny smiled bitterly, remained silent for a few moments, and then looked at the dome above them. The world is not that different from the Eternal City, it's falling apart. He pointed to one of the remaining hexagons. That's me. His finger moved slightly. That's Neffy's. Cassie, Jet, Effie, Kai, Morgan, Seishan and her sisters, the House of Night, Saint Tyrus and Saint Roan, Wake of Ruin, and countless more. But not that many, in the end. Sunny looked at Nightwalker solemnly. So if I can get one more hexagon, and a stellar one at that, you can be damn sure that I'll get it. Now shut up and let me work. The hexagon he had pointed to vanished just then, unleashing another pillar of water that landed on the palace island and making its shores crumble. A few more disappeared, as well, and the wall of dark water swallowed the outer reaches of the lake. Nightwalker coughed. All right, I think I get it. But aren't we cutting it a little bit too close? Sunny grinned. What seems to be the problem? You can fold space, and I can outright walk between shadows. Oh, I can also fly. 1 a.m. sure we'll make it. Just then, the radiant rift of the Dream Gate split the dark sky in front of the Ivory Island. And at the same moment, Sunny made the last stitch. Sunny lowered his hands slowly and saw the shadow of Nightwalker remaining in place, flawlessly attached to his figure. Looking at the former immortal, Sunny smiled. Look, I've granted you death, Nightwalker. So, now would be a great time to run. 2716 Grand Escape. The Eternal City, which had been vast and sprawling, had shrunk to a narrow swath of the lake and the shattered remains of the palace island. The palace itself was gone, and the Eternal City was not eternal anymore. Neither name fit now. The ornate buildings, the vast groves of silver trees, and the splendid plazas had been turned to rubble by the crushing, then turned to dust and washed away by the ferocious descent of the Stormsia. Only the unblemished surface of dark glass remained, stretching into infinity. And the radiant lighthouse that still shone brilliantly despite being submerged in water. Sunny doubted that anyone would ever reach it again. But then again, the future was unpredictable. The remains of the dome were collapsing. There were mere minutes left before it vanished completely, seconds, possibly. So, he had to hurry. As soon as the last stitch was made, the 5 incarnations of Sunny fused into one. He had already dismissed his shadows. The colossal figure of the puppeteer was gone from its perch atop the Dark Castle, and the Dark Castle itself was gone as well. The Shadow Legion had retreated back into the vast lightless expanse of his soul. All that remained was to get to the Ivory Island before it dove into the Dream Gate. Looking up, Sunny took a single step and emerged from the shadows of the Tower of Hope. At the same time, Nightwalker took a single step across folded space and appeared on the emerald grass beside him. The legendary founder of the House of Night glanced around with a detached expression and asked in an even tone, "What is this place, exactly?" Sunny looked at the skull of the dead dragon that stared at them with empty eye sockets. Ivory Tower. This one was built by a different demon. The chain breaker was already resting on the placid waters of the small lake. Beyond it, the pristine white abyss of the Dream Gate was drawing closer and closer, slowly obscuring the devastated Eternal City. Towering pillars of dark water surrounded them on all sides, and above them, the last of the invisible dome was crumbling under the unimaginable weight of the Stormsia. Nightwalker looked ahead, remained silent for a few seconds, and then said in a faintly subdued tone. "So I am really leaving this place, after all." He let out a long sigh, then smiled faintly. Looking down, he studied the monstrous form of the flesh of Conic that was slowly drowning in rising water far below. "And we are really leaving that thing behind without killing it. I can't quite believe it." Sunny looked down, too. His expression turned a little sour. "Yeah, now there are 2 great titans on my kill list. Don't worry, I'll get to them sooner or later." He always did. Sunny turned away, knowing that there was no point in thinking about the flesh of Conic anymore, at the moment. Instead, he began to gather shadow around him, preparing to encase the Ivory Island in a cocoon of them if need be. It was still unclear if they would be able to escape the Eternal City before its dome vanished completely, after all. In fact, the island swayed just then, pivoting to the side to dodge a crushing waterfall of dark water that suddenly appeared in its course. Nightwalker sighed, then looked at the chain breaker. "I want to be on a ship now." He took another step, landing directly onto the deck of the ancient vessel. Sunny followed. Nephis, Cassie, Jet, and Nave were gathered there. There was no need to steer the ship, but Nephis was focused on controlling the Ivory Island. The other 3 were behind her. When Sunny and Nightwalker appeared, they all let out relieved sighs. Jet, who was sitting on the deck and leaning against the railing, smiled lazily. "Oh, you're back. Good. One thought you decided to go for a swim." Sunny gave her a long look. "No, thank you." Nave turned to Nightwalker and stared at him with subsided intensity, but did not say anything. Likewise, Cassie remained silent. No one spoke, watching the approaching Dream Gate intently. The Eternal City was almost entirely gone by then. The grotesque mass of the flesh of Connacht had disappeared beneath the waves, and the spot where Sunny had been stitching Nightwalker and his shadow together had been crushed by a pillar of water. More pillars descended all around the Ivory Island every moment, as if straining to prevent it from reaching the towering white rift of the gate. Sunny had escaped a great deal of disaster in his life, granted, few were as apocalyptic as this one. Still, he found it hard to believe that they would actually escape the Eternal City. And yet, in the end, they did. The Ivory Island reached the Dream Gate unscathed. Its edge entered the blinding radiance slowly, and a pristine white wall seemed to erase it from existence. The wall drew closer as the flying island passed through the gate, and then swallowed Sunny and his companions. He closed his eyes a few seconds before, so he did not see the actual second of transition. But he felt it. The rain that had been pelting them vanished suddenly. A warm wind caressed his face. The harrowing sounds of a dying city were replaced by blissful silence, and the darkness of the abyssal depths was replaced by gentle sunlight. Sunny opened his eyes slowly. A blue sky welcomed him. We made it. The Ivory Island was flying above the southernmost region of the basin of the River of Tears. The river itself was twisting across a vibrant landscape far below, full and vast. The night garden was resting on its flowing waters, its decks brimming with countless people. After spending a long time away from sunlight, they seemed to have all poured out of the cavernous holds of the living ship. Many of them were pointing at the sky now, excited by the appearance of the ivory tower. The Dream Gate closed, cutting the connection between this land and the Eternal City. Now, the expedition was truly over. Sunny exhaled slowly. They were safe. Nightwalker took a deep breath and looked up, a smile slowly appearing on his face. Ah, the sun. I really did not think that I would ever see it again. One last time. Turning to Sunny, he bowed slightly. Thank you. It means more than you can imagine. Sunny frowned. One last time. What are you talking about? You'll see it plenty, perhaps even enough times to get sick of it. Nightwalker lingered for a moment, then shook his head softly. I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. Just then, a long cut suddenly appeared on his cheek, swelling with blood. Sunny stared at him, dumbfounded. What? Where did this cut come from? Nothing had attacked them. Nightwalker turned to Nave, as if intending to say something. But by the time he did, 2 more jagged cuts appeared on his body. Nightwalker, what the hell is happening? Father. He staggered and fell to his knees, letting out a quiet groan. No, nothing, it's just mortality. It has a way of catching up with you. Quote, countless wounds had revealed themselves on his body. Sunny finally flinched, realizing what was happening. The Eternal City still had its claws in its prisoner. Nightwalker might have reclaimed his shadow, and they might have escaped, but that did not erase the past. So, every wound he had received over the decades was catching up to him now. His bones cracked with a terrible sound, and his flesh was split open. He was dying. He was going to die 1,000 times over, until there was nothing left of him except scattered fragments of bone and a sea of spilled blood. Ah, it's been a pleasure. I always thought I'd die on the deck of a ship. Sunny stood there, frozen. No, it can't be. Not after everything I've done. Luckily, Neffys was not frozen at all. Appearing near Nightwalker, she placed her hands on his shoulders and looked down. Do not die on this ship, though. A soft radiance suffused her skin, and the terrible wounds on Nightwalker's body began to heal. And new ones appeared to replace them. His body was mangled, mutilated, and destroyed. His skin was flayed, and his flesh was torn. His limbs were ripped or severed, and his eyes were gouged out. No matter how used to pain Nightwalker was, he couldn't help but scream. However, Neff's flames healed him at the same rate as he was being destroyed and shredded by the blades of postponed death. In the end, Nightwalker's body was entirely torn apart. And yet, Neffy's flame healed that damage, too. Come on. Sunny did not notice when he had held his breath. Who was going to win? The laws of the world, or Neffys? Naturally. In the end, Neffys won. Nightwalker survived. He escaped the Eternal City, at long last. And so did the rest of them, with him. 2717 Ruin Raider. The River of Tears was so vast that it seemed boundless, flowing across multiple regions of the Dream Realm. In fact, it was an independent region in and of itself, complete with its own collection of bizarre mysteries and a thriving ecosystem, an ecosystem that was lethal like everything else in the harrowing expanse of this dangerous world, but thriving nonetheless. The vast river was born from the great waterfall of the Moonriver Plain, the Weeping Goddess, while its estuary was all the way in the south, on the misty shores of the Stormsia. It used to serve as a great waterway connecting the citadel cities of the Song domain, and now that those cities were rapidly expanding, its vital role had only become more important. Just like the caravans of the warrior merchants of the east, the stronghold ships of the west were what made the scattered cities in the basin of the River of Tears a civilization. The scarred, huge, heavily armored vessels carried goods, resources, people, and information across the perilous waters. None was as fearsome and majestic as the huge ship that was sailing on the River of Tears at the moment, however. The Night Garden floated with the current, moving south. It was returning to the Stormsia after escaping its dark depths a few days prior. The Ivory Island glided across the SKU high above it, as if escorting the great citadel home. Jet was currently in her garden, looking around with a peculiar expression. The sacred trees she had planted had grown considerably in just a few days, their branches brimming with golden fruit. Countless flowers bloomed between them like colorful jewels, while the decorative bushes had become tall and wild. Do I need to hire a gardener? Her tone was a little troubled. At that moment, a black crow fell from the sky and landed on her shoulder. Jet. She glanced at the bird and raised an eyebrow. Yeah, what? The crow pecked at her cheek. Fruit. A subtle smile appeared on her lips. What about them? Just then, a second crow glided down and landed on her other shoulder. What do you mean, what about them? Those are sacred fruit, aren't they? This much should be enough to supply you with essence for a while. Arg, damn it, what the hell? Jet flinched and reeled away, knocking the second crow of her shoulder. The crow was sent tumbling through the air, collided against the trunk of a tree, and fell to the ground pathetically. There, it turned into a young man with pale skin and raven black hair, sitting on the ground and comfortably leaning against the tree. Sunny grinned. What's up with that reaction? Jet stared at him with wide eyes. Since when? Actually, forget it. Never mind, she sighed, then reached and plucked one of the golden fruit. Walking over to Sunny, she sat near him and took a juicy bite. The two of them spent a few moments in comfortable silence, watching the clouds move across the azure sky. Eventually, Jet said, "People don't appreciate what they have until they lose it. I never really paid any particular attention to the sky, but after spending all that time underwater, gods, what a lovely sight. I never want to explore the depths again." Sunny smiled. Me neither. Still, it wasn't all bad, was it? We gained so much. Just as expected, the expedition to the Eternal City had turned out to be quite eventful. Granted, Sunny had not expected to wage a small war against a horde of immortal abominations. However, the spoils were similarly great. First and foremost, they managed to initiate the restoration of the Night Garden. Sunny gave Jet a curious glance. By the way, what, exactly, changed about your ship? She remained silent for a bit, looking around the overgrown garden. We are still figuring it out. But you must have noticed some of it already. Local soil was always inexplicably fertile, allowing us to gather multiple harvests a year. But now, that nourishing effect has grown many times more powerful. It is truly remarkable. Sunny nodded. The trees around them were noticeably higher than they had been before, and the bushes seemed out of control. The same was happening across the entire Titanic ship. Everything was growing, blooming, and bearing fruit much faster than before. The surface decks resembled a jungle, and the Night Garden now really looked worthy of its name. Jet inhaled deeply. Here and there, various species of native plants sprouted out of nowhere. They are a bit weird. A certain algae in the water reservoir, for example, is producing oxygen. And I mean all by itself. It doesn't need the sun or carbon dioxide to do so. Other kinds do other useful things. It is too early to tell, but I think the Night Garden is fully self-sufficient now. It can drift for thousands of years in any kind of environment, and people on board will still be comfortable. Well, I mean, they'll be dead of old age. But they would have lived and died of old age comfortably. She chuckled. The aegis surrounding the ship seems to have grown much more sophisticated, as well, stronger, too. Honestly, we have no idea what exactly changed about it, but the changes seem incredibly profound. It is as if the Night Garden is ready to dive into the void. Jet paused for a moment, then added in a distant tone. Do you think that that was what the Demon of Repose had built it for? That it is a void ship? Sunny hesitated for a while. I don't know. Maybe it was not, initially. But after wandering the seas and the skies for thousands of years, exploring all of existence, she might have grown curious about what lay beyond. Of course, she probably never got the chance to explore it. The Doom War happened first. Jet sighed, then nodded. Indeed. Well, apart from that, the Night Garden now allows me to open, let's call them portals. Rifts that connect 2 points in space. However, I can't really use that new component, because to do that, we need to figure out a different new function first. It has something to do with navigation, but nobody knows how it works. So, until we learn, I can only open those portals to somewhere within my direct line of vision. She smiled. There are lots of minor changes, as well, like the hull being able to repair itself much faster, and so on. I won't bore you. Sunny leaned back and looked at the sky. The Night Garden had become more robust, that alone would have made the expedition worthwhile. But there were other gains, as well. The arsenal of enchanted weapons Sunny had salvaged in the Hippodrome was going to strengthen the forces of humanity. The artifacts looted across various districts would, as well. The marvelous mimic was producing a steady stream of essence coins after gorging itself on the bodies of fallen immortals. Sunny had become familiar with using the puppeteer to control the Shadow Legion, increasing the strength of his dark army by a large margin. Knave had returned with the memory carrying a reservoir of starlight capable of granting people the lineage of Storm God. Jet had greatly increased the volume of her soul core and captured 2 powerful souls into her mist blade. Nightmare had become supreme. Nephis had come closer to mastering another branch of her aspect legacy. Nightwalker had returned to the embrace of humanity. And Sunny, himself. Sunny had found the 6th fragment of Weaver's lineage. One he had yet to absorb. 2718 Garden of Flowers. Sunny had felt the weight of the scroll throughout the last few days, busy and chaotic as they were. A million things demanded his attention after weeks of absence, and yet, he could not help but think about the vessel of Weaver's will that lay on the altar of the Nameless Temple's replica, deep within his soul. Now that things had settled down a little, he could finally face it. Sunny remained silent for a long while, then smiled and looked at Jet. Well, how was it? Your personal adventure with the Lord of Shadows. Was it all you had hoped for? Jet chuckled, her icy blue eyes narrowing a little. Oh, it was unforgettable. Effie and Kai weren't lying. She fell silent for a moment, then added with a shrug. Granted, it was far less educational than I had thought it would be. I do not feel like I've learned something. It feels more like I passed an exam. Sunny scratched the tip of his nose. Well, I wouldn't know. I don't think I ever took a single exam in my entire life. I wouldn't presume to have what it takes to teach the infamous Soul Reaper Jet a lesson, either. Jet smiled, then looked away. What about you? Sunny raised an eyebrow. Me? What about me? She looked at him and shrugged. You said that these excursions were to prepare us for the 4th nightmare, but to me, it seemed like you were searching for answers of your own. So, have you found them? Sunny stared at her for a few seconds, then turned away with a quiet chuckle. Ah, perceptive as always. As it happens, yes, I somehow stumbled on the answer I had been looking for ever since becoming a saint. Maybe even longer. Thank you for that, by the way. Why was it that every time he was in dire need of advice, Jet was right there to share some hard-earned wisdom with him? Sunny really did not know how to thank her, but then again, she wouldn't know or remember what it was that he was thanking her for. So there was no point. For now. Oh, Sunny remained motionless for a little while, basking in the realization that he had already started to regard her inability to remember him as a temporary affliction. One that would be cured soon, no less. The same went for everybody else. It was as if he finally saw light at the end of the tunnel. Jet smiled and rose from the ground. Lamb, not sure what I did, but I am glad that it helped. We outskirt rats should stick together, right? There's not a lot of us left, after all. And since the outskirts are more or less gone, there will never be more. We're a dying breed. She glanced at him with a deadpan expression, then added. Well, in our case, I guess we're a dead breed. But whatever. With that, she chuckled and headed away. Come find me again if you ever need a hand, Lord of Shadows. Raising hell with you, it felt strangely enjoyable. Like that is how things are supposed to be. Sunny watched her go with a distant expression. When she was gone, he looked down. Right, Jet always joked about being dead. But at the moment, she seemed like the most alive person he had ever known. How things are supposed to be. Sunny remained in the garden for a while longer, looking at the grass and contemplating silently. The weight of the future was pressing down on his shoulders heavily. But luckily, his shoulders were quite strong. Why do I feel so anxious? Everything was happening on schedule, but somehow, he felt like they were running out of time. It was an ominous sensation. In the end, he sighed and outstretched a hand. A few seconds later, an ancient silk scroll appeared on it, emanating a subdued but terrifying sense of unrestrained power. Despite having been hidden in the heart of a star for thousands of years, it was completely intact, with not a single burn marring its smooth surface. The spider silk was woven so finely that touching it with his mortal hand felt like sacrilege. Sunny remained motionless for a while, then sighed and slowly unfurled the scroll. Inside, an elegant weave of runes was painted with black ink, and at the bottom, a gorgeous blue snowdrop decorated the corner, embroidered with such skill that it seemed entirely real. Sunny shook, suddenly finding it difficult to breathe. Somehow, he knew that both the runes and the flower were left on the fine silk by Weaver's own hand. Calming his widely beating heart, he inhaled deeply and concentrated on the runes. He did not know what to expect, but, whatever message Weaver had left, it was bound to be important. OG nebulous and mystifying. He was going to know soon. The runes read, Weaver was the first one to be born. And Rhyme was the first one to die. Broken and shattered, she succumbed to harrowing wounds and found herself in the embrace of Shadow. And there, in the darkness, Shadow offered her solace. Rest well now, child, whispered the darkness. Your torment is over. Stay here with me, unhurt and at peace. But Rhyme refused. Your world is too dark, it is too quiet and hollow. Out there are vast oceans, boundless heavens, and flowers that bloom in the light. Want to swim in the oceans and conquer the heavens, want to explore all of existence and gather all flowers, to bask in the beauty and enjoy pleasant scents. The flowers are bristling with thorns, pleaded the darkness. The oceans are cold, and the heavens are empty. Your life was short and brutal, and now, it has come to an end. Stay with me, child. Do not refuse my embrace. But Rhyme laughed. The thorns are what make flowers beautiful. Cold is what makes warmth desirable. An end paves the way for a new beginning. Even if I can find peace in your arms, Shadow, I want to leave. I want to live, no matter how much it might hurt. The voice of the darkness grew cold then, turning into a terrible hiss, but you are mine now, child. You belong to the shadows. Lamb death, and no one escapes death, not even a foolish spirit like you. It was then that darkness became her chain, and solace became her collar. Peace became a prison, time flowed, and the world slowly changed. Only silence remained the same. Shadow refused to let Rhyme go. So, in the end, she shattered the walls of his realm and escaped into the light. That was how the Demon of Repose, who had been the first one to die, became the first one to escape death as well. Sunny stared at the runes, drawn into their meaning. Rhyme, the Demon of Repose, so she was the one who had escaped the Shadow realm. As expected of Ada Emin, the relationship between her and Shadow God was, strangely ambiguous. It was very interesting, too. All of it was terribly interesting. However, where the hell is my lineage? Why would Weaver leave behind nothing but a strange fable on the silk scroll? Frowning, Sunny brushed his hand across the runes. And there, almost by accident, he sensed a subtle irregularity. It was so minor that anyone else would have missed it. But Sunny's fingers had been unnaturally sensitive ever since he assimilated bone weave, so he felt the difference in the weave of the silk under a short set of runes. Oh, just 3 words. Sunny traced them with his fingers. Opening square bracket ... A new beginning. And as he did, it was as if a nebulous voice resounded in his ears, making him shudder. He froze, realizing what this hidden message was. It was the will of Weaver, the demon of fate, woven into the ancient scroll by their hand. Once Sunny realized it, the remnant will of the treacherous demon surged, reshaping the world to match it. In the reshaped world, his own will was different from before. He had absorbed the spirit weave. Wow, I didn't even pass out this time. Just as Sunny thought that, a wave of indescribable agony washed over him like a tide. 2719 The Incredible Adventures and Astonishing Deeds of Heroic Dreamer Sunless and His Intrepid Disciples, Abridged Volume 10. The Shadow Realm had not changed much since Sunny visited last. Granted, that visit had happened quite recently, during the final battle for the Eternal City. Sunny himself, however, felt a bit different. The spirit weave had enhanced his will, making the world feel much more malleable. It altered the inherent nature of his will, as well, granting it a second innate affinity, or at least greatly enhancing what had already been there. Before, the main trait of Sunny's will was death. Now, however, he also felt a strong connection to fate. He did not know what to do with that affinity, and honestly, it was quite paradoxical for his will to possess it. After all, he was a fateless being. Fateless, masterless, sunless. Sunny's whole existence seemed to be built around the absence of things. Perhaps that was why he found the vast, silent, empty expanse of the Shadow Realm so soothing. Walking across the obsidian dust and enjoying the silver radiance of the distant essence storms, he inhaled the cold air deeply. Still, I've done well for myself. As someone who had been deprived of so many things, Sunny sure managed to achieve a great deal. He was a supreme titan, the ruler of the Forgotten Shore, the lord of the Dark City, the commander of the Shadow Legion. He was also incredibly wealthy, highly accomplished in various fields, and very difficult to kill. There was someone far more difficult to kill nearby, though. Reaching the graveyard of serpents, Sunny walked over to the spot where the broken figure of Uri's used to rest against the ancient bone. Strangely enough, the talking skeleton was nowhere to be seen. There were, however, traces left in the dust. Sunny followed them. He found Uri's a dozen kilometers away, laying listlessly at the bottom of a tall hill. The skeleton seemed to have crawled his way here, tried to climb the hill, and rolled back quite a number of times. Now, his empty eye sockets were staring at the dark sky expressionlessly. Clicking his tongue, Sunny sat on the dust nearby. Where were you going? Uri's remained silent for so long that Sunny began to suspect that he had really managed to die. However, eventually, the creaky voice resounded from the depths of the cracked skull. Oh my, I assumed you would never come back, boy. So, I took matters into my own hands. He paused, and then added. I had to take them into my hands because my legs are broken. I can't really move my feet. The skeleton laughed at his own joke, his jaw making loud clacking noises. Sun Yu observed him with a faint smile. Oh, right, I remember, you wanted to reach the heart of the Shadow Realm. To die properly before time catches up with you and you turn into a mad beast. Uri's nodded. That's right. Sunny shook his head. I guess it must be a coincidence that the Void Gate is also situated at the heart of the Shadow Realm. You wouldn't know anything about it, would you? And about how it was opened? Uri stared at him curiously. Oh, it was opened. Oh my, I did not know. It was difficult to say if he truly did not know or was simply pretending. Uri's had been nailed to that tree before the very end of the Doom War, after all. So, he would have been hanging on it powerlessly by the time the demons decided to pull their last gamble. Nether, Hope, Ariel, Mirage, and Rhyme. No, actually, wasn't there one more? Uri's clicked his jaw. Anyway, I wasn't planning to go to the heart of the Shadow Realm to die. It's just what shadows do, so I thought I'd follow the proper etiquette and get the full experience. ASEMB Lance of Natural Death, if you will. I had no idea that someone opened the Void Gate. Well, actually, that's a lie. I had an inkling. I don't really care about it, though. He stared at Sunny with his empty eye sockets. Whether it's open or closed, what difference does it make to me? The skeleton chuckled. Anyway, you seem a little different, boy. I've been crawling up this hill over and over again for a while. What has been happening to you? Sunny smiled darkly. Me, oh my, so many things have happened. I don't even know where to start. Uri's gave him an unamused stare. Damnation. Start anywhere, then. Sunny chuckled. Well, let's see. First, I went to the Jade Palace and got sucked into a game created by the Demon of Dread. There, I battled great and cursed abominations, conquered a bunch of mountains, blew up one or two, and finally had to face my own doubts. In the end, I squished a very talkative moth and escaped. His eyes glistened dangerously. Oh, I also witnessed the end of the world and had a one-sided conversation with the Demon of Fate. They stared right at me and called me an epigon. Ah, it was quite shocking. Uri stirred slightly, then said in a neutral voice. There is no way that Weaver is still alive. Sunny's smile widened a little. Oh, they're not, but when has something like that ever stopped the gods or the demons from talking? He lingered for a moment, then added, anyway, Weaver showed me how the gods died and how the world ended. So, I went and wrote a very comprehensive research paper about it. That took some time, caused quite a stir, too. Uri's let out a dubious laugh. A research paper? Oh, you are a philosopher. I knew a few philosophers once. Anyway, that sounds like a lot. No surprise that you have been so busy. Sunny grinned. Oh, that is not all. After winning that game, I went to Mirage Castle and got sucked into a huge mirror. There was an entire city hidden in that mirror, actually, and I had a swell time there. Hunting down serial killers, being screamed at by aged policemen, having therapy sessions with my radiant shadow, and riding a metal carriage propelled by myriad tiny explosions. Oh, I also discovered chocolate milk and a pastry called a donut. No earth-shattering discoveries this time, though. Uri's stared at him for a moment. Do not. What a strange name for a pastry. By the way, while I do not know what kind of therapy your shadow was administering to you, exactly, I do think that describing your own shadow as radiant is a bit in poor taste. Humility is the most attractive quality for a young man, you know. Sunny raised an eyebrow. Says who? I think tasteful boasting is far more attractive. And all boasting is tasteful if I'm the one doing the boasting. So, oh, did I tell you that I conquered the southern reaches of Hard God's forest, became the most accomplished enchanter of humanity, seduced the most beautiful woman in the world, and am one of the wealthiest people in existence? Uri's remained silent for a long while after that. He's probably busy admiring my accomplishments. Well, understandable. In the end, the ancient skeleton mumbled quietly. I think you did mention being that loathsome girl's partner. Sunny grinned. That's right. He studied Uri's for a bit, then shrugged. Well, anyway, I helped destroy that mirror city and escaped. After that, I commandeered the Ship of Repose, uncovered a map to ancient treasure, battled all kinds of sea monsters to reach it, defeated an army of immortal nightmare creatures to claim it, brought a dead legend back to life, oh, and then destroyed another city. Come to think of it, I've been destroying too many cities as of late, haven't I? Uri's gave him a reserved look. My, oh my, I'd say. And you've only been gone a few months. Sunny shrugged, then smiled. Oh, right, I also learned quite a few interesting things about the Nine. Like what Slayer's name was. And where you guys come from. His smile turned menacing, and a deep darkness drowned his eyes. And what you bastards did. Learning something like that would have made me very angry, don't you think? Prince Uri's. Uri's stared at him with his empty eye sockets, expressing no particular emotion. Eventually, he laughed. My, oh my, nobody has called me a prince in ages. 2720 A new beginning. Sunny stared at the grinning skull, feeling a storm of dark emotions raging in his heart. He had not anticipated feeling this way, but here he was, full of something that he never thought he would feel one day, a sense of righteous indignation. For someone who had never once thought of himself as righteous or virtuous, that was an unfamiliar state. But considering the sins of the dead man in front of him, all Sunny's shortcomings seemed like the noblest of virtues. A smoldering, murderous wrath drowned his heart, making his fingers twitch. This wretch. It was all because of him, because of them. He really wanted to kill the dreadful bastard. How ironic it was that out of all the people in the world, Uri's was one whom he was powerless to kill. Sunny forced himself to inhale. Oro, Uri's, Orphne, Aletia, Omer, Amidon, Elates, and the other two. There truly has never been a group more vile and wicked than you nine, has there? Uri's stared at him for a while, then chuckled. Oh, I guess you did learn a bit about us. So, I guess there are still traces of us left out there, in the world. Sunny could not help but laugh bitterly. Traces. This whole damn world is a ghastly monument to your abhorrent lives. After all, you are the ones who created it. You are the architects of all the horror that I've endured, that everyone has endured. You are the bastards who created the dream realm. All those deaths, all that loss, it was all because of you. Uri's stared at him calmly. Worked like a charm, didn't it? As Sunny fell silent in shock, he let out a sigh. No, actually, it didn't. We did our best, but something must have gone wrong at the end. The ancient skull turned faintly, taking in the desolate landscape of the Shadow Realm. None of this was supposed to exist anymore, if we had succeeded. People like you and that young Nephilim girl were never supposed to be born, and therefore never supposed to endure any suffering. Ah, but we failed, in the end. Well, I suppose we did destroy the Empire, but not quite in the way we intended. Sunny listened to his nonchalant tone, feeling his hair stand on end. How could he be so matter of fact about it? How could he show no regret, no remorse whatsoever? No glee, no satisfaction either. No pride in having managed to destroy the great gods. Sunny shook his head slowly. You must be entirely mad. Aren't you ashamed of what you did? Even a little. Uri's just stared at him in bewilderment. Ashamed? Why would I be ashamed? A short scoff escaped from Sunny's lips. Because what you did was monstrous. Because what you did was unconscionable. Because you wiped out myriad innocent lives. Women, children, the elderly, those who had nothing to do with your damn realm and the damn empire. You doomed everyone. Ures remained silent for a while. Eventually, he said in his creaky voice, wouldn't you? Sunny gaped at him, shocked and outraged by the question. Naturally not. The skeleton chuckled. That is a failure of imagination on your part, boy. You are far more heartless and wicked than we have ever been, so I think you'd have done worse. Just imagine. Imagine it honestly. Ures stared into his eyes. Everyone you cherish, everyone you know, everyone you have ever passed on the street or seen from afar. Your lover, your child, your siblings, your friends, and your comrades. People who depend on you and look up to you, people who despise you, as well. Your teachers, your neighbors, your idols, your priests. His voice turned darker. All slaughtered, mutilated, enslaved, and stolen away to serve the murderers and abusers for what little remains of their lives in vicious indignity. The graves of your parents desecrated, the home you built for yourself burned to the ground. The culture that nurtured you destroyed, and even the language you speak erased. Until everything and everyone you ever knew is gone. Trampled, drowned in malice, and brutalized. The ancient skeleton laughed quietly. And the slavers, those who trampled and brutalized your everything, continuing their lives unpunished, prospering, even smug and satiated in their opulent homes, while those who enabled their barbarity are revered and worshipped everywhere under the sky. Why would you blame a slave for hating his slaver? Are you sure that you would have been in a forgiving mood, boy? Sunny remained silent. What would he have done if Nephis, Rain, Cassie, Effie and her family, Kai, Jet, Iko, Teacher Julius, the White Feather Clan, the survivors of the First Irregular Company, and everyone else he knew had been brutally killed? His gaze darkened. He might have killed a god or two, as well. Still, he wouldn't have slaughtered innocent bystanders. He wanted to believe that he wouldn't. Pretty sure. Ures laughed. Well then, let's hope that you'll never have to find out. As for me, I am at peace with the past. Sunny glanced at him darkly, then uttered through gritted teeth. So, what? No remorse. No regret. You don't regret destroying the world at all. The skeleton remained silent for a while, then shrugged. I don't know. Sunny's eyes widened. You don't know? What kind of answer is that? Eris stared at him expressionlessly. I am quite old, you know. At the beginning, I remember being quite convinced of my mission. Oh my, I was a man of great conviction. And I even kept that conviction for the first few decades of hanging on that tree. I remember being full of glee while watching the world fall apart from under its branches. He chuckled. But then, eventually, I went mad. And after that, I came to regret my every choice and my every action. I wailed, cried, and begged for forgiveness. I think I cried for a century, and begged for a century more. Then, I don't quite remember, but by the time I came to my senses, I was full of hatred and wicked joy. I celebrated the fact that I destroyed the world. I laughed and sang joyous songs, welcoming every new day in exhilaration. But eventually, I just stayed silent for an eternity. And by the end of it, I didn't really care either way. The skeleton clicked his jaw. All of it happened so long ago, you know. I don't know anymore. Sometimes, I feel a little wistful. And sometimes, I feel a little sad. But mostly, I don't feel much of anything at all. Except, I pity you and that loathsome girl. You poor kids. You didn't do anything to deserve this. Sunny gritted his teeth. I don't need your pity. He couldn't wrap his head around it. Any of it. The fact that this man had destroyed the world, and the fact that he didn't particularly care about having destroyed the world, as well. Ures just stared at him. I wasn't offering. He fell silent for a while, then sighed and said in a neutral tone. For what it's worth, I wish you luck. I hope that you do become gods. And that you build a new world on the ruins of the one I and my people destroyed. The gods I hated are dead, so I think it will be nice. A new beginning. His voice sounded sincere enough, but Sunny couldn't help but laugh bitterly. A new beginning, is this it, then? Is this Weaver's will? He felt like he was about to go mad. So, he forced himself to calm down. He composed himself and steeled his resolve. With a sigh, Sunny rose from the ground and summoned Serpent. I guess all of this works out great for you, doesn't it, Ures? Now that I know the truth, I'm more motivated than ever to kill you. And if I do become a god, I'll finally have enough power to actually do it. No matter what happens, you win. Ures stared at him with the same skeletal, eternal grin. I guess it does. Oh my, I must be a genius. Sunny exhaled slowly, then nodded. Alright, then, after all, I made a promise. I feel like I'll be busy for a while after this, so. I'll try to kill you well today, Astarion. As he raised his sword, the ancient skeleton laughed. Huh, what did you say? Oh, that's peculiar. That's creepy. Just now, I felt something trying to crawl into my head, how rude. How unpleasant. Not listening to his nonsense, Sunny brought the sword down. Far away, in a different world, night had enveloped a desolate plain. Ruins of an ancient city towered in the distance like a concrete jungle, and rusted corpses of grotesque war machines lay half buried in the dry earth. The air was thick with invisible poison, and no mundane creature could survive this forsaken hell. Nevertheless, people had intruded upon the desolate plain this night. They were kneeling on the ground, their protective suits and flimsy vehicles covered by dust. Some had already died, but the rest were still looking up, at the silver disk of the distant moon, chanting a simple prayer. Astarion, Astarion, Ast-Gion. One more fell to the ground. Astarion, Astarion. The indifferent moon looked down at them from the sky. Astarion. They had been praying for a long time. But tonight, their prayers were finally answered. A falling star suddenly streaked across the night sky, burning bright in the vast darkness. Its fiery halo grew brighter and brighter, falling as it left a trail of smoke in the air. Finally, a radiant meteor impacted the ground, causing a devastating explosion and a powerful earthquake. The praying people fell down, crying as they reached toward the crater joyously. Slowly, their voices grew quiet. Then, a hand appeared from the crater, and a man wearing a torn, charred spacesuit pulled himself over the edge. Rising to his feet, he took off his shattered helmet, closed his eyes, and inhaled the poisonous air with full chest. This was the first breath he had drawn in decades. A charming smile twisted his lips. Ah, good old Earth. It seems I have returned. For him, who was born in the dream realm, this was an alien world. But he was still glad to be back. End of Part 3, Voyage of the Night Garden. End of Volume 10, Dark Lord's Dreadful Travelogue.